The dust rose like a silent prayer at the end of the afternoon, staining the sky with hues of rust and abandonment. The three girls stood side by side in the crooked shadow of a twisted tree, as if they were part of it. Their wrists were bound with strips of worn cloth, their eyes tearless but not without pain. A cattle auction had just ended, but what remained there were not oxen. They were human lives. So young they still carried the scent of childhood in their tangled hair. So marked they seemed too old to hope for any miracle. No one shouted prices. It was all whispers. Everything was done in silence, with eyes that avoided facing the truth. It was an underground market, disguised as ancient tradition. Adopted, they said, but no one softened their gaze. The girls came from a house that was never a home, a clandestine orphanage where hunger was the only constant sound. The eldest, Clara, shielded the other two with her body. Mariana, 12, and Lucia, 10. As if she were their mother, their ground, as if her skin could stop the world. The man organizing the sale had a voice too thin for such a hard heart. He spoke as if reciting the weather forecast. All three for the same price. They're clean. None have caused trouble. No one answered, until the rumble of an old engine tore through the scene. It was a black car, polished, gleaming like sin disguised as a promise. From it stepped a white-haired woman, her posture straight as a blade. She wore a navy blue dress, imported leather shoes, and a pearl brooch at her collar. Everyone fell silent. They knew who she was. Donna Matilde, owner of farms, factories, and favors. She didn't smile, but she had a kind of beauty that commanded silence. Her eyes scanned the scene as if appraising land, but when they landed on the three girls, something broke inside her. She didn't show it. She simply stepped forward and said, "I'll take all three." The man swallowed hard, tried to negotiate, but the old woman merely pointed. "The price will be tripled, but with me, they won't be treated like animals." The transaction was done in less than 10 minutes. The false records were burned right there, in an improvised bonfire made of fence scraps. With each page that disintegrated, Clara felt a thread of hope ignite in her chest. But she didn't know if she could trust it, because no one had ever done this. No one had ever chosen all three. They had never been taken together. They always wanted just one, the youngest, the prettiest, the most promising. But now they were all in the back seat of a clean car, smelling of lavender and fresh bread. The journey to the farm was long. The field seemed endless, and the sky stretched wide in silence as if wanting to embrace them. Donna Matilde didn't speak much, but every now and then she glanced in the rearview mirror and asked, "Do you want water? Is it too cold back there? Has anyone ever seen a mango ripening on the tree?" The questions didn't demand answers. They were seeds cast onto hardened soil, and the girls, still wary, only shook their heads or whispered, "No, ma'am." When they arrived, the gate creaked like an old friend. The house was ancient, but vast. Wide windows, a hammock on the porch, a wood-burning stove lit. The smell of wet earth and cornbread mingled with the sound of crickets. Clara squeezed her sister's hands, but they weren't pulled or pushed. Donna Matilde simply got out, opened the door, and said, "Come in. This house is yours now, too." No one moved, until a lit oil lamp was placed in Lucia's hand. And there, without words, the night began to take on a new name. In the days that followed, time learned to move again. The girls took hot baths for the first time. They ate until they said, "Enough." They slept in beds with clean sheets where fear didn't slip through the cracks, but it was on the third day that the greatest surprise came. Matilda gathered the three in the living room, sat in a rocking chair, and began to tell her story. "I had 3 sons, each in their own way. None share the same father, but I raised them all with the same hand. Firm hand, open hand. They're grown now. Good men, hard-working, but lonely. I look at them and think something's missing." Mariana whispered, "Us?" And Matilda smiled for the first time. "No, my dear. Love is missing. Someone to care for them the way you care for each other. I didn't buy wives. I rescued a future. And if one day your hearts choose to walk alongside theirs, let it be a choice, not an obligation." Clara's stomach churned. It was all moving too fast, but there was something in the old woman's eyes that wasn't a trap. It was a desire for rebuilding. The sons began to arrive the following week. One by one, first came Thomas, the eldest. Silence in his eyes, calloused hands, the scent of a workshop and ripe guava. Then Miguel, a clay artist who saw shapes in clouds and colors in the dark. Lastly, Caio, the middle one, spoke little but played the guitar like he was touching a soul. There was no formal introduction, just encounters, in the orchard, in the kitchen, in the stable. Small accidents of fate, orchestrated by Matilda with invisible hands. Little by little, bonds formed. Mariana laughed at Caio's jokes. Lucia spent afternoons watching Miguel shape figures. And Clara resisted. She was afraid. She carried promises within her that she swore never to break. But Tomás looked at her as if recognizing a wound. And he never pushed her. He just waited. One day, he left a blank notebook on the hammock where she often read. He wrote only, "When you're ready to tell your story, I'm here." The rain fell that day, heavy, intense, washing away the dust of the past. The girls ran out to dance in the wet earth. They laughed like never before. And Matilda, from the porch, wiped her eyes. The rebuilding began there, in the mud, in the laughter, in the broken silence. She knew the world wouldn't easily accept this. A wealthy old woman buying girls to marry her sons. But she didn't buy them. She returned what the world had stolen, the right to belong. Time on that farm wasn't measured by clocks but by gestures. It was the smell of coffee brewed before sunrise, the sound of the hammock's clasp being hooked to the porch beam. It was the ripe mango that fell on its own and the notebook that little by little began to fill with words. Clara, at last, started writing. Not everything, just fragments, words that came like timid breezes. Pain, promise, silence. Peace? With a question mark. Tomás never read without permission, but he always left something beside the notebook. A flower, a seed, a button from his shirt. Small signs that he was there. In the big house, Matilda watched everything. Without interfering but never absent. She knew true bonds aren't built in haste. They require time, healing, and a table where everyone feels they belong. She began teaching the girls to make bread, to care for the chickens, to decipher the sound of the winds. Little by little, each gained a small space to call their own. Mariana claimed the corner of the porch where the sun rose. Lucia chose the attic room where she found old drawings in the wooden ceiling. Clara stayed in the hammock with the notebook in her lap and her soul under construction. But every paradise carries an echo of the past that insists on returning. One late afternoon, when the sky looked like cotton stained with rust and wine, a dark pickup truck stopped in front of the farm. The gate creaked with suspicion. Out stepped a thin, tall man, his eyes hidden under a dirty hat. It was the same man who had organized the auction, the same one who had sold the girls. He had come for explanations. He said there were people asking questions, powerful people, that this kind of business couldn't just disappear, and that Matilda may have bought the girls but not the silence. She didn't flinch. She simply ordered coffee to be prepared, asked him to sit, and spoke as if cutting with a bread knife. "I didn't buy silences. I bought justice." The man laughed. An ugly laugh, toothless, soulless. "Justice doesn't make a profit, ma'am." She looked at him deeply. "But it brings sleep. I sleep in peace." That night, the sons felt the tension in the air. Caio locked the windows. Miguel extinguished all the outdoor lamps. Tomás stood on the porch until the last cricket fell silent. Clara stayed by his side, in silence. She understood that kind of fear, the fear that makes no noise but screams inside. And there, in that shared darkness, she finally spoke. "If they come back, will you let me protect my sisters?" Tomás nodded. "But first, let me protect you." The next day, Matilda called everyone to the table. It was Sunday. The white tablecloth, embroidered by hands long gone, was spread out. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air, but the tension was different. She looked at her sons, then at the girls, and said, "The world will say this is wrong, that you're not family, that I'm crazy, that you're opportunistic, but only we know what we feel when we look into each other's eyes." Lucia, with wet eyes, slowly raised her hand. "I don't know what a mother is, but can I call you a tree?" Everyone exchanged glances. Matilda smiled. "Why my flower?" And Lucia answered with cutting simplicity, "Because you're where we took root." No one could eat, but they all stayed there, around the table, just existing, as if breathing together was a form of resistance. In the days that followed, the man in the hat's visits became more frequent. Sometimes he left notes at the gate. Sometimes he sent messages through a delivery boy, always with threats disguised as warnings. You'll pay for this. Those girls have a price. This house will fall. But each message was burned in the wood stove's fire, along with garlic peels and candy wrappers. One day, Mariana found an envelope with an old photo. It was her, even younger, with a number written on her shirt. Next to it, a note. Don't forget who you are. She ran to Clara, trembling, feeling like a thing again, an object, a shadow. Clara hugged her tightly. You're not that. We're not that anymore. And Mariana replied, Then give me a new name. Clara smiled, moved. You already have one. You're a promise. That same night, Matilda made a decision. She went to the city, spoke with a retired judge who owed old favors. She brought records, photos, evidence of mistreatment, documents she had gathered since the first day. She requested retroactive adoptions, backdated, as if the girls had been hers since they were little. It was a risk. But it was necessary to give the girls a new surname, a legal shield, and an emotional one. The day the papers arrived, the three cried as if waking from a nightmare. Now they were Matildes, Mariana Matilde, Lucia Matilde, and Clara Matilde. The name didn't erase the pain, but it tattooed dignity onto paper. The celebration was impromptu. Wooden chairs on the porch, Caio's guitar, mud on their feet, Jabuticaba wine hidden from the grandmother's pantry. Clara wrote in the notebook, Today is the day my story gained a surname. The following days were of tense calm. They knew peace provoked envy, and that happiness for some was an offense. A fire started in the corral one midnight. Miguel woke to the smell of smoke. Everyone ran. Caio grabbed a bucket. Tomas cut the fence to free the animals. Clara helped Lucia carry water. Mariana shouted for Matilde. But the old woman was already there in her nightgown and boots, putting out the fire with whatever she had. At dawn they saw tire tracks. It was clear it wasn't an accident, but no one spoke of fear. Matilda simply said, They want us to turn back to dust, so we'll become seeds. And they did. The corral was rebuilt in 3 days, not in haste, but with purpose. Every piece of charred wood was repurposed somehow. Miguel turned the darkest pieces into small sculptures, like silent guardians. Mariana planted sunflower seedlings around the new fence like a shield of light, and Tomas, with calloused hands and deep eyes, built a new gate with his own hands. If they try to come back, they'll have to get through me, he said. Clara looked at him, wordless. She just held the edge of his shirt and didn't let go. The days continued with a new kind of silence. No longer the silence of pain, but of waiting. At any moment, something could happen. The world outside didn't know how to handle the fact that an old woman had broken the rules, that she had offered bonds instead of profit, family instead of farce, and that 3 girls with no one now had everything. And then, on a morning of shallow sun, with the scent of ripe mango and warm breeze, Matilda put on her best dress, pinned her hair with the pearl brooch, and called everyone to the shade of the tree where it all began. The same tree where the girls were first seen, wrists bound and hearts hidden. Now that same space was an altar. She looked at her sons, lined up before her, in simple clothes but with shining eyes, then at the girls, now women, now free, and said, Today I don't demand anything, but I invite. And then she extended her hands, as if planting in the air. If you wish, exchange rings, not to erase the past, but to sow a future, not as a debt, but as a choice. Lucia laughed nervously, holding a ring made by Miguel from horseshoe iron. Mariana looked at Caio and murmured, Only if you promise to play for me until I grow old. He nodded with his eyes, but Clara hesitated. Her silence was different. Matilda saw and understood. She approached slowly, took her hand and said, You don't need to be anything more than you already are. Love is also staying. And Clara stayed. There was no official ceremony, no justice of the peace, no priest. Just wind, leaves, and freshly baked bread. The rings were exchanged amid the sound of crickets and whistles. The promises were made without words. And that night, each pair slept under the same roof, with the same surname, and dreams stitched by trembling hands. The man in the hat never returned, but they heard the operation was dismantled by anonymous tips, that other girls were found, that the orphanage became ruins. Matilda never confirmed, but everyone knew. Her pearl brooch had been missing from her collar for a few weeks, and when it returned, it was chipped. Some years later, a notebook was published. Simple cover, timid title, Root, Stories of Those Who Were Chosen. It was Clara's. The preface began with a single sentence. Comment family if you believe true bonds are care, not blood. And the following pages were memory, pain, beauty, healing, no real names, but every feeling laid bare. The book traveled through fairs, schools, community centers. Girls across the country began to write. Letters arrived at the farm almost daily, some with drawings, others with prayers. Mariana read them aloud while picking jabuticabas. Lucia responded with handmade cards. And Matilda aged in peace. One day, while sewing patches on the porch, she said softly, "The seed took root." No one understood at first, but it was true. What she planted wasn't charity. It was root. And roots aren't seen, but they sustain. Clara opened a school on the farm. It started with 3 girls, then 12, then 40, all with similar stories, all thirsty for a fresh start. The classroom was under a jambu tree, the blackboard, an old door, and the bell, a piece of iron hung on the entrance tree. When it rang, it wasn't a summons, it was an invitation. Matilda died one late afternoon, with the scent of rain in the air and the reddest mango of the season hanging over the window. She fell asleep in the hammock, smiling. Beside a lit oil lamp was a note written by Clara. "You were the tree, now we are a forest." At the funeral, there were no expensive flowers, no long speeches, just the girls, those from yesterday, those from today, in simple dresses holding seeds. Each planted one in the garden, and the headstone didn't bear a name. It read only, "Here rests she who taught that to love is to give a name to those called nothing." In the final chapter of Clara's book, she wrote, "If someone ever says you're worth nothing, answer with silence. But build, care, embrace, because there are wars won without shouting, and there are homes born in the midst of mud." If you've read this far, comment justice if you think she deserved more. Comment faith if you believe restarting is possible. And comment family if you too believe true bonds are care, not blood. The end.